The carriage door swung open to reveal stone walls and silent halls that had been her prison for 17 years. Dorothea Clare stood in the convent courtyard, her hands trembling as a tall, imposing figure emerged from the shadows. A man whose very presence commanded the world to bend. "You are my ward," the Duke of Ashford declared, his voice cutting through the morning mist like a blade. "And I have come to claim what was stolen from both of us." A dude, but nothing could have prepared her for the words that followed, whispered with an intensity that made her heart stop. "I will make you my Duchess, Dorothea Clare, and damn anyone who questions it." If you are listening to this story, do not forget to click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments from which part of the world you are listening to this story. I want to know how far it has traveled. The bells of St. Catherine's Convent chimed their solemn melody across the Yorkshire moors, as they had done for 2 centuries, marking the hours of a life that moved in endless circles of prayer, silence, and invisible chains. Dorothea Clare knelt in the chapel, her hands folded in practiced devotion, but her mind wandered far beyond the cold stone walls that had defined her existence since she was barely old enough to remember another life. She was 20 years old, though she felt ancient in ways that had nothing to do with years. The other novices whispered about her, the bastard niece of a forgotten nobleman, deposited at the convent's gates with a purse of gold and instructions that she was never to leave. Mother Superior had been clear from the beginning. Dorothea's path was predetermined. She would take her vows within the year, becoming Sister Dorothea, and the shame of her illegitimate birth would be buried forever beneath layers of black cloth and pious prayer. The year was 1868, and beyond these walls, England was transforming. Railways connected distant cities, industry boomed, and society pages chronicled the glittering lives of the aristocracy with breathless enthusiasm. But Dorothea knew nothing of that world, except through stolen glimpses of newspapers that the gardener sometimes left on the bench near the herb garden, and through the stories Sister Agnes would whisper late at night when the dormitory fell silent. Dorothea possessed a beauty that seemed almost cruel in its contrast to her surroundings. Thick chestnut hair that caught auburn fire in sunlight, luminous grey eyes that held depths of intelligence no amount of forced humility could dim, and a face of such delicate structure that even the shapeless grey novice's habit could not disguise her elegance. She moved with unconscious grace, her posture always perfect despite years of being taught to make herself small, invisible, unworthy. "You are wool-gathering again, Dorothea," Sister Margaret's sharp voice cut through her reverie. The older nun stood at the end of the pew, her expression pinched with perpetual disapproval. "Mother Superior wishes to speak with you immediately. A visitor has arrived." A visitor. In 17 years, Dorothea had received exactly 3 visitors. A stern-faced solicitor who came annually to verify her continued residence, speaking only to Mother Superior, while Dorothea stood silent and observed. The idea of someone asking for her specifically sent a tremor of something unfamiliar through her chest. Hope? Fear? She could not name it. She followed Sister Margaret through the cloistered walkways, her footsteps echoing on ancient stone. The convent smelled of beeswax candles, old incense, and the peculiar mustiness of places where sunlight was considered an unnecessary luxury. They passed the refectory, where her meals had been eaten in silence for 17 years, the dormitory where she slept in a narrow bed identical to 20 others, the library where she had discovered that books could be windows to worlds she would never see. Mother Superior's office was austere, containing only a desk, 3 chairs, and a crucifix that dominated the wall with its bronze suffering. But today, the room felt different, charged with an energy that made Dorothea's skin prickle with awareness. A man stood by the window, his back to the door, his frame tall and commanding, even in stillness. He wore the clothes of the highest aristocracy, a perfectly tailored black coat, grey waistcoat and trousers that spoke of London's finest tailors. When he turned, Dorothea felt the air leave her lungs. He was perhaps 35, with dark hair silvered slightly at the temples, a strong jaw, and eyes of such piercing blue they seemed to see through flesh and bone to the very truth beneath. His face was aristocratic, handsome in the severe way of men accustomed to power, but there was something else there, a barely contained fury that made him appear dangerous despite his civilized appearance. "Miss Clare," he said, and his voice was deep, cultured, with the effortless authority of someone who had never been denied anything. "I am Benedict Ashford, Duke of Ashford, your guardian." The words made no sense. Dorothea stared at him, feeling Mother Superior's disapproving presence behind her like a physical weight. "My guardian, your grace, I was told. That is, I believed I had no family." "You were told a great many lies, it would seem." Benedict's jaw tightened, and he shot a look at Mother Superior that could have frozen fire. "I inherited the dukedom 9 months ago upon my uncle's death. In sorting through his affairs, I discovered certain irregularities, including the existence of a ward I knew nothing about, hidden away in this place for 17 years. The arrangement was quite proper, your grace," Mother Superior interjected, her voice tight. "The child's mother died in disgrace, and her father was my uncle's younger brother, making Miss Clare my first cousin," Benedict interrupted, each word precise and cutting. "Her mother may have been of humble birth, but their union, while secret, was legal. I have the marriage certificate, which means, Mother Superior, that Miss Clare is not the bastard she was labelled as, and her imprisonment here has been both unnecessary and cruel." The room spun. Dorothea grasped the back of a chair, her carefully constructed understanding of her own identity crumbling. Not a bastard. Her parents had been married. She was legitimate. The shame she had carried like a stone around her neck for 20 years was based on a lie. "I have come to take custody of my ward," Benedict continued, producing papers from his coat. "Everything is in order. Miss Clare will return with me to London today." "Today?" Dorothea's voice emerged as barely a whisper. "But I am to take my vows." "You will take no vows." Benedict's eyes met hers, and she saw something fierce there, something protective and possessive that made her heart race. "You will take your rightful place in society, Miss Clare. You are the cousin of a duke, and you will be acknowledged as such." Mother Superior's protests faded to background noise as Dorothea tried to process the impossible. London, society, a life beyond these walls. It was everything she had dreamed of in her most secret, guilty moments, when she allowed herself to imagine a different existence. But it was also terrifying, a vast, unknown world for which 17 years in a convent had left her desperately unprepared. "I have nothing," she said finally. "No clothes suitable for... I do not know how to..." "You will learn," Benedict said simply. "My mother's sister, Lady Thornbury, has agreed to sponsor you. She will teach you everything necessary. But we must leave now. I have already wasted 9 months not knowing of your existence. I will not waste another day." Within an hour, Dorothea found herself in the Duke's carriage, watching the only home she could remember disappear behind a curtain of autumn rain. Benedict sat across from her, his presence overwhelming in the enclosed space. He had been silent since they departed, his expression unreadable as he gazed out the window at the passing countryside. "Why?" Dorothea asked finally, unable to bear the questions burning inside her. "Why did your uncle hide me away? Why tell everyone I was illegitimate?" Benedict's jaw clenched. "My uncle was a controlling, ambitious man. When my father, his elder brother and the previous duke, died, he inherited the title. He had no legitimate children of his own, only a reputation for ruthlessness in business and politics. I suspect he found it convenient to eliminate any complications, any potential claimants to the family name, who might prove inconvenient to his machinations." "And you?" Dorothea's voice was barely audible. "What do you intend for me?" Benedict turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "I intend, Miss Clare, to give you the life that was stolen from you. I intend to introduce you to society as my acknowledged cousin and ward. I intend to see you properly dowered and established. He paused, something dark and determined crossing his features. "And I intend to make certain that no one, ever makes you feel ashamed of your birth again." The promise hung in the air between them, heavy with implications Dorothea did not yet understand. She turned to look out the window at the unfamiliar landscape rolling past, her future suddenly as vast and uncertain as the storm-dark sky. The golden cage of the convent was behind her, but what lay ahead terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. As night fell and the carriage rolled toward London, Dorothea caught Benedict watching her with an expression she could not name, something between determination and something else, something that made her pulse quicken with an awareness she had no words to describe. The Duke had found his forgotten ward, but neither of them yet understood the true cost or consequence of bringing Dorothea Clare into the light. London in late autumn was a revelation of sensations Dorothea had never imagined. The city assaulted her with noise, colour and movement after 17 years of enforced silence and stillness. The Ashford townhouse on Grosvenor Square was a palace compared to the convent's austerity. All marble columns, crystal chandeliers, and carpets so thick her footsteps made no sound. Lady Thornbury, Benedict's aunt, was a formidable woman of 60 with sharp eyes and sharper wit. She took one look at Dorothea and declared her a diamond of the first water hidden under a bushel for far too long. The transformation began immediately. New clothes in fabrics Dorothea had never touched, dancing lessons that left her feet aching, deportment instruction that corrected years of making herself small, and endless tutorials on the Byzantine rules governing aristocratic society. "You must understand, child," Lady Thornbury said one afternoon as they took tea in the drawing-room. "Society is not kind to those perceived as outsiders. Your legitimacy has been established beyond question. Benedict made certain every solicitor and genealogist in London verified the documents. But you will still face scrutiny, whispers, and those who resent your sudden appearance." "I understand," Dorothea replied, though she did not really. She could not fathom the world Lady Thornbury described, where a person's worth was determined by bloodlines and social position rather than character or accomplishment. Benedict was often absent during those first weeks, attending to business in Parliament and his estates. But when he was present, Dorothea found herself hyper-aware of him in ways that confused and unsettled her. He would ask about her lessons, listen intently to her tentative observations about London, and sometimes she would catch him watching her with that same intense, unreadable expression she had first seen in the convent. "The Duke is quite devoted to your welfare," Lady Thornbury observed one evening, her tone carefully neutral. "It is unusual for a man of his position to take such personal interest in a ward's introduction to society." Dorothea felt heat rise to her cheeks. "He feels responsible for the years I lost." "Perhaps." Lady Thornbury's expression suggested she suspected something else entirely, but she did not elaborate. The plan was to introduce Dorothea gradually, first to intimate family gatherings, then to select social events, building her reputation carefully before attempting anything as grand as a court presentation. But fate, in the form of Lady Marguerite Ashford, had other plans. Marguerite was Benedict's second cousin, a beautiful, calculating woman of 28, who had long assumed she would eventually become Duchess of Ashford. She had been conducting a subtle campaign to secure Benedict's proposal for years, using her impeccable breeding, social connections, and carefully cultivated charm to position herself as the obvious choice. Dorothea's sudden appearance threatened everything Marguerite had worked toward. A ward, a female ward of marriageable age and stunning beauty, residing in Benedict's household was scandalous enough. But worse, Marguerite recognized something in how Benedict looked at his newly discovered cousin, something that made her blood run cold with fury. She struck during Lady Pemberton's autumn ball, a glittering affair attended by everyone who mattered in London society. Lady Thornbury had deemed Dorothea ready for her first true public appearance, and Benedict had personally escorted both women. his pride in Dorothea's transformation evident in every gesture. Dorothea wore a gown of pale silver silk that made her grey eyes luminous, her chestnut hair arranged in an elegant style that revealed the graceful column of her neck. She moved through the ballroom with newfound confidence, her natural intelligence and months of intensive training combining to create an impression of effortless elegance. She was a sensation. Men flocked to request dances. Matrons whispered approvingly. Even the patronesses of Almack's, those fearsome arbiters of social acceptance, nodded their acknowledgement. For the first time in her life, Dorothea felt the intoxicating warmth of belonging, of being seen not as shameful or invisible, but as someone of value and beauty. It was in that moment of triumph that Marguerite made her move. "How remarkable!" Marguerite's voice rang out across a sudden lull in conversation, pitched to carry across the ballroom. "That dear Benedict has become so attached to his ward. Though I suppose it is natural for a man to feel protective toward a young woman he has rescued from such unfortunate circumstances." Dorothea felt, rather than saw, Benedict tense beside her. Lady Thornbury's hand gripped her arm in warning, but Marguerite continued, her smile poisonously sweet. "We must all admire Miss Clare's resilience, raised as she was in a convent under the belief she was, well, one hesitates to use such an indelicate term in polite company. But I understand the confusion about her parentage was quite understandable given the circumstances of her mother's situation. The implication was clear, deliberate, and devastating. Marguerite was suggesting that despite the legal documents, despite Benedict's acknowledgement, there remained questions about Dorothea's legitimacy, and worse, about the nature of her relationship with her guardian. The ballroom had fallen silent. Hundreds of eyes fixed on Dorothea, watching to see how she would respond to this public attack. She felt her carefully constructed confidence crumble, the old shame rising like bile in her throat. She was back in the convent, being reminded she was worthless, unwanted, a burden to be hidden away. "That is quite enough, Marguerite." Benedict's voice was cold as winter ice, his aristocratic features set in lines of barely controlled fury. But the damage was done. "Oh, I meant no offense," Marguerite continued, her expression all innocence. "I simply think it important that everyone understand Miss Clare's unique situation. After all, for a young woman to be living unchaperoned in a bachelor's household, even if he is technically her guardian, well, it does invite speculation, does it not?" Lady Thornbury began a sharp retort, but Dorothea could not hear it over the roaring in her ears. She saw the faces around her shift from admiration to speculation, from warmth to calculating coldness. She saw the matrons who had smiled at her now whisper behind their fans. She saw the young men who had sought her company suddenly look away, as if association with her might contaminate them. And worst of all, she saw pity in some eyes. Pity for the girl who had dared to dream she might belong, who had forgotten for a few precious hours that she would always be the bastard niece, the charity case, the scandal waiting to explode. "I need air," Dorothea managed, her voice barely steady. She turned and fled, not caring that running away was the worst possible response, that it confirmed every terrible implication Marguerite had planted. She pushed through the crowd, ignoring Benedict's call, ignoring Lady Thornbury's concern, focused only on escaping the suffocating weight of shame and exposure. She found herself in the Pemberton's garden, gasping for breath in the cold night air, her beautiful silver gown suddenly feeling like a costume, a pathetic attempt to be something she could never truly be. Tears, which she had not allowed herself in 17 years, finally broke free, streaming down her face as she clutched the stone balustrade. Behind her, she heard footsteps, and then Benedict's voice, rough with an emotion she had never heard from him before. "Dorothea, do not." She held up a hand without turning, unable to bear his pity. "Do not tell me it does not matter. Do not tell me Marguerite was simply jealous and cruel. I saw their faces. I saw what they truly think of me. What they think is irrelevant." Benedict moved to stand beside her, his presence solid and commanding even in her devastation. I will ruin Marguerite for this. I will make certain she never shows her face in society again. I will—" "You will make it worse," Dorothea interrupted, finally turning to face him. "You will confirm everything she implied, that there is something inappropriate between us, that I am using you, that I am exactly the scheming adventuress she suggested." Benedict's hands clenched at his sides, his expression tortured. "I brought you into this. I thought I could protect you, that my name and position would be enough to shield you from the truth?" Dorothea's laugh was bitter. "The truth is that I am exactly what she said. A girl raised believing she was illegitimate, brought into your household, entirely dependent on your charity and goodwill. The marriage certificate changes nothing about who I actually am. It changes everything about who you actually are." Benedict stepped closer, his intensity almost overwhelming. "You are my cousin. You are legitimate. You are entitled to respect and acknowledgement. I am entitled to nothing," Dorothea said wearily, the fight draining from her as quickly as it had ignited. "I understand that now. I should never have believed. I should never have let myself hope that I could simply step into a life I was never prepared for." She turned away from him, staring out at the dark garden, her future suddenly as bleak and confined as it had been in the convent. Perhaps more so, because now she knew exactly what she would be missing. The warmth of belonging, the pleasure of beautiful things, and most dangerous of all, the intoxicating presence of a man who looked at her as if she were something precious, something worth protecting, something more than the shameful secret she had always been. The ball continued inside, music and laughter drifting through the windows like mockery. Dorothea stood frozen in her humiliation, unable to go back, unable to move forward, trapped in the terrible space between the life she had lost and the life she could never truly have. And beside her, Benedict stood equally trapped, his promise to give her everything suddenly revealed as the hollow dream it had always been. The journey to Somerset was undertaken in heavy silence. Benedict had insisted Dorothea leave London immediately, before the scandal could fully ignite. Lady Thornbury had agreed, arranging for Dorothea to stay with her widowed sister, Lady Beatrice Hartwell, at her estate in the countryside until matters settled. Dorothea understood what that meant, until she was forgotten, until the embarrassment faded, until she could be quietly married off to some minor gentleman willing to overlook her tainted introduction to society in exchange for Benedict's generous dowry. It was a solution, practical and prosaic, and it made her heart ache with a loss she could not fully name. Lady Beatrice proved to be a revelation. Unlike her more conventional sister, Beatrice was a woman of formidable intellect and independence. Widowed at 40, she had inherited her husband's considerable fortune and used it to pursue interests society deemed eccentric for a woman. She funded archaeological expeditions, supported a school for working-class girls, and maintained a salon where artists, writers, and intellectuals gathered regardless of their social standing. "So you are the infamous Ward," Beatrice said, when Dorothea arrived at Hartwell House, a beautiful estate surrounded by rolling hills and ancient forests. She was a handsome woman of 55, with silver-streaked dark hair and eyes that sparkled with intelligence and mischief. The one who sent London into paroxysms of scandal simply by existing. Dorothea flinched, but Beatrice waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, do not look so devastated, child. London scandal is as fleeting as morning fog. Next week, some duke will elope with an actress, or some political scandal will erupt, and you will be entirely forgotten. The trick is to use the time productively." Productively? Dorothea had expected sympathy or pity, not this brisk pragmatism. "Indeed, you have been given a gift, though you likely cannot see it yet, freedom from obligation. No one expects anything of you at the moment, which means you can decide who you wish to become, rather than allowing society to dictate it for you." Over the following weeks, Dorothea discovered what Beatrice meant. Hartwell House was unlike anywhere she had experienced. neither the oppressive silence of the convent nor the rigid formality of London society. Here, she was encouraged to read whatever interested her from Beatrice's extensive library, to walk the grounds without propriety restrictions, to speak her thoughts freely, and to discover what genuinely engaged her mind and heart. She found herself drawn to Beatrice's charitable work, particularly the school for girls. These children reminded her of herself, dismissed by society, denied opportunities, assumed to be worth less than their more privileged counterparts. She began helping with lessons, discovering she had both aptitude and passion for teaching. "You are a natural," Beatrice observed one afternoon, watching Dorothea work with a particularly shy student. "The children trust you. They see themselves in you, I think." "Perhaps," Dorothea admitted. "I understand what it feels like to be told you do not matter, that your life has already been decided, that hoping for more is foolish presumption, and yet you hoped anyway. As they will, with the right encouragement." Beatrice smiled warmly. "You are more resilient than you know, Dorothea. That humiliation in London did not destroy you. You are simply discovering that there are many kinds of meaningful lives, and society's narrow definition is not the only one worth pursuing." Benedict wrote weekly, formal letters that carefully avoided any mention of feelings or the disastrous ball. He reported that Marguerite had been quietly sent to her family's Scottish estate for her health, that London gossip had indeed moved on to other scandals, and that he had established a generous trust in Dorothea's name to ensure her financial independence regardless of her eventual marriage. It was the last letter that both touched and wounded her. Financial independence meant she would not be a burden, but it also felt like a severance, Benedict arranging her life so that he would no longer need to be personally involved, so that she could be released from his direct care with her dignity intact. Winter settled over Somerset with surprising gentleness. Dorothea found herself surprisingly content in this quiet life, though she recognized it could not last forever. Beatrice's salon continued through the colder months, and it was at one of these gatherings that Dorothea met Dr. Sebastian Thorne. Sebastian was 32, a physician with a prestigious practice in Bath, who was also passionate about medical reform and public health. He was handsome in a scholarly way, light brown hair, warm hazel eyes behind spectacles, a kind smile, and an intensity when he spoke about his work that reminded her painfully of Benedict. "Miss Clare," he said when they were introduced, "Lady Beatrice tells me you have been assisting with her school. I have long believed education is as vital to health as any medical intervention. Perhaps we might discuss your observations." It was the beginning of something unexpected. Sebastian became a regular visitor to Hartwell House, and while he initially came for Beatrice's salon, it soon became clear he was drawn particularly to Dorothea. He treated her as an intellectual equal, valued her opinions, and seemed entirely uninterested in the scandal that had driven her from London. "You must understand," Beatrice said one evening after Sebastian had departed, "that Dr. Thorne is considered an excellent match. His family is gentry, his reputation is impeccable, and his future is very bright. He is also clearly smitten with you." Dorothea felt her chest tighten. "He is kind. He is more than kind. He sees you, Dorothea, truly sees you, not as a charity case or a scandal or a burden, but as a woman of intelligence and worth." Beatrice studied her carefully. "And yet you hesitate. Why?" "Because he is not Benedict," Dorothea thought, and the realization struck her with the force of physical blow. She had been carefully not thinking about her guardian, not examining the way her heart leapt at his letters, not acknowledging that the devastation at Lady Pemberton's ball had been as much about his potential disappointment in her as society's rejection. "I do not know if I am ready," she managed finally. "Then take more time," Beatrice said gently, "but do not close yourself off to possibility out of fear. You deserve to be loved, Dorothea. You deserve to be chosen." When spring arrived, Benedict wrote that he would be visiting Somerset on business and hoped to call at Hartwell House. The letter was polite, distant, proper, and yet Dorothea read it a dozen times, her heart racing at the prospect of seeing him again after 4 months of separation. He arrived on a bright April morning, and Dorothea's breath caught at the sight of him descending from his carriage. If anything, the months apart had only intensified his effect on her. He wore riding clothes that emphasized his powerful frame, and when his blue eyes met hers, she saw something flash there before his expression settled into careful neutrality. "Miss Clare," he said formally, bowing over her hand, "you look well. Somerset agrees with you." "Your Grace," she replied, equally formal, though the touch of his hand through her glove sent electricity up her arm. "You are welcome at Hartwell House." The visit was torture of the most exquisite kind. Benedict stayed 3 days, conducting business with local landowners and spending evenings at Beatrice's salon. He was polite, cordial, and utterly proper, treating Dorothea with exactly the distant courtesy appropriate for a guardian toward his ward. And yet she caught him watching her when he thought her attention elsewhere, his expression hungry and conflicted in ways that made her pulse race. On his last evening, Sebastian also attended the salon, and Dorothea saw Benedict's jaw tighten when the physician sat beside her, when he made her laugh with a witty observation, when his hand briefly touched hers as they examined a botanical illustration. After the other guests had departed, Benedict found Dorothea alone in the conservatory, where she had escaped to calm her turbulent emotions. "Dr. Thorne seems quite attentive," he said without preamble, his voice carefully neutral. "He is kind," Dorothea replied, the same words she had used with Beatrice, feeling their inadequacy. "He would make an excellent husband. His character is impeccable, his prospects sound. Lady Beatrice speaks highly of his integrity." Benedict's hands clenched at his sides. "If he makes an offer, you have my blessing to accept." The words landed like stones in still water, creating ripples of pain that Dorothea struggled to conceal. "I see. You are eager to discharge your obligation." "That is not," Benedict broke off, his composure cracking. "I want you to be happy, Dorothea. I want you to have the life you deserve, with a man who can give you respectability, security, and you believe Dr. Thorne can provide that where you cannot?" The words escaped before she could stop them, revealing far too much. Benedict's eyes blazed with something fierce and desperate. "I can provide you with nothing but continued scandal. You are my ward, my cousin. For me to—" He stopped himself abruptly, as if recognizing dangerous ground. "Dr. Thorne can offer you everything I cannot. A future without whispers, without questions, without the constant shadow of impropriety." "I see," Dorothea said again, her throat tight with unshed tears. "You have thought of everything." She turned to leave, but Benedict caught her arm, his touch burning even through fabric. "Dorothea." "Your Grace," she interrupted, using his title like a barrier. "I thank you for your care and generosity. I will consider Dr. Thorne's suit, should he make one, with all the practicality it deserves." She pulled free and fled, leaving Benedict alone in the conservatory, his expression devastated. In her room, Dorothea finally allowed herself to acknowledge the terrible truth. She had fallen in love with her guardian, the Duke who had rescued her, the man who was offering her to another because he believed it was the right thing to do. And she would have to let him because he was correct. They had no future together that would not destroy them both. The golden cage of the convent had been replaced with a new prison, more painful because it was built not of stone walls, but of social conventions, propriety and impossible love. Summer arrived, and with it, an unexpected invitation. The Duchess of Marlborough was hosting a grand house party at Blenheim Palace, and Lady Beatrice had been invited, along with her protégée, Miss Dorothea Clare. "The Duchess is an old friend," Beatrice explained, watching Dorothea's apprehensive expression. "She is also one of society's most powerful arbiters. If she acknowledges you publicly, endorses your position, the scandal will be definitively buried." "Why would she do so?" Dorothea asked, suspicious of such timely intervention. Beatrice's smile was knowing. Because Benedict asked her to. He has been working quietly these past months to rebuild your reputation, calling in favors, making it clear that anyone who slights you slights him personally. This invitation is the culmination of those efforts. Dorothea's heart twisted. Even now, from a distance, Benedict was trying to protect her, to give her the future he believed she deserved. It made what she had to do both easier and infinitely harder. "Doctor, Thorne has made an offer," she said quietly, "a formal offer of marriage." Beatrice's expression softened with understanding. "And have you given him an answer?" "Not yet, but I will accept. He is everything Benedict said. Kind, intelligent, steady. He offers me a good life, free from scandal, with meaningful work alongside his medical practice. It is more than I ever dreamed of having. And yet you sound as though you are planning your own funeral rather than your wedding." Dorothea managed a weak smile. "I am being practical, realistic. I am choosing the life I can actually have, rather than dreaming of impossibilities." "Oh, my dear," Beatrice sighed, "you cannot marry one man while in love with another. It is unfair to everyone involved. I will learn to love Sebastian. He deserves that, and I will try." Dorothea straightened her shoulders. "But first, I will attend this house party. I will face London's society again, and I will show them that I am not ashamed, not defeated, and not dependent on anyone's pity or charity." The journey to Blenheim Palace was undertaken with a mixture of dread and determination. Dorothea wore a travelling dress of deep blue that brought out the grey of her eyes, her hair arranged in a sophisticated style that Lady Beatrice's maid had perfected. She looked every inch an aristocratic lady, confident and elegant, a far cry from the devastated girl who had fled Lady Pemberton's ball. The house party was a glittering affair, attended by the cream of English aristocracy. Dorothea recognized many faces from her brief London season, and she watched their reactions carefully as she was announced. Some looked uncomfortable, others curious, but when the Duchess of Marlborough, a formidable woman of 60 with impeccable style and sharper wit, greeted Dorothea warmly and publicly, introducing her to other guests with obvious approval, the tone was set. Dorothea was to be accepted. The Duchess had spoken. What Dorothea had not anticipated was Benedict's presence. She saw him across the grand drawing-room on the first evening, deep in conversation with several gentlemen, and her heart stopped. He was devastating in evening dress, his dark hair and blue eyes standing out dramatically against the stark black and white of his formal attire. When his gaze found hers across the room, the intensity in his expression made her breath catch. He excused himself from his companions and crossed to her with purposeful strides. "Miss Clare," he said, bowing formally, "I did not know you would be attending." "Your Grace," she replied, proud that her voice remained steady. "I could say the same. The Duchess is an old friend of my late mother's. I could hardly refuse her invitation." His eyes searched her face. "You look radiant. Somerset has been good for you." "Thank you. I have been very happy at Hartwell House." She paused, then decided to be direct. "I understand you arranged this invitation. I am grateful, though it was not necessary." "It was entirely necessary," Benedict said quietly. "What happened at Lady Pemberton's ball was unjust and cruel. You deserve to face society again from a position of strength, or to demonstrate that I have moved beyond my need for your protection," Dorothea countered gently. "Benedict, you cannot spend your life managing mine. You have done more than enough, more than anyone could reasonably expect of a guardian." The use of his given name, the first time she had done so in months, made his eyes darken. "Dorothea? Miss Clare?" Marguerite's voice cut through the moment like a blade. She approached with a gentleman Dorothea did not recognize, a beautiful face arranged in an expression of false warmth. "How delightful to see you have emerged from your rustic exile. May I introduce Lord Ashworth? He has recently returned from India with a considerable fortune and is eager to meet all of society's most interesting ladies." The implication was clear. Marguerite was suggesting Dorothea would be interested in Ashworth's money, making her appear mercenary and desperate. Lord Ashworth himself looked uncomfortable, clearly a pawn in Marguerite's continued campaign of subtle cruelty. But Dorothea was no longer the devastated girl who had fled into a garden. She had spent months with Lady Beatrice, learning that her worth was not determined by society's approval, that she had intelligence, capability and value that existed independent of anyone's opinion. "How kind of you to think of me, Lady Marguerite," Dorothea replied with a gracious smile. "And though I must confess I find myself quite content with my current circumstances, Lady Beatrice has been teaching me that true wealth lies in meaningful work and genuine connections rather than social manoeuvring. It has been quite liberating." The barb landed with precision. Marguerite's smile tightened, and beside Dorothea she heard Benedict make a sound suspiciously like a suppressed laugh. "Indeed," Benedict added, his voice smooth but edged with steel. "Miss Clare has been doing remarkable work with Lady Beatrice's charitable school. The Duchess was just telling me she hopes to replicate the model on her own estates. It seems my cousin's influence extends far beyond what any of us anticipated." The use of "my cousin," claiming their familial connection publicly and proudly, was a deliberate statement. Marguerite's expression went rigid, and Lord Ashworth, sensing the undercurrents, excused himself hastily. "You seem to have recovered admirably from your difficulties," Marguerite said, her voice tight, "though I wonder if rural society truly prepares one for the complexities of London life. Some mistakes once made cannot be entirely erased." "You are quite right," Dorothea agreed pleasantly. "One's character is revealed most clearly in moments of crisis. Those who respond with cruelty and manipulation expose themselves far more thoroughly than their intended victims ever could." "I'm grateful for the lesson." Marguerite's face flushed with anger. Before she could respond, the Duchess of Marlborough appeared at Dorothea's elbow, her timing impeccable. "Miss Clare, I have been longing to introduce you to Lady Catherine Westbrook. She is establishing a women's college in Oxford and is desperate for intelligent women to serve on the advisory board. I immediately thought of you." And as the Duchess swept Dorothea away, she caught Benedict's expression. Pride, admiration, and something darker, more possessive that made her skin flush with awareness. The following days at Blenheim were a strange dance of social triumph and personal torment. Dorothea was indeed accepted, even celebrated, her intelligence and reforming interests making her popular among the more progressive members of society. She found herself at the center of fascinating conversations about education, social reform, and women's advancement, discussions that energized and excited her. But beneath it all was the constant, torturous awareness of Benedict. He seemed to be everywhere, watching her at dinner with an intensity that made her hands tremble, standing too close during garden walks, his voice dropping to dangerous intimacy when they found themselves briefly alone. And yet he maintained perfect propriety, never crossing the invisible line that separated guardian from ward, cousin from cousin, propriety from scandal. On the fourth evening, Dr. Sebastian Thorne arrived, having been invited by Lady Beatrice specifically to demonstrate Dorothea's eligible status and respectable prospects. He was warmly welcomed, his reputation as a progressive physician making him interesting company for the intellectual set. Benedict's reaction to Sebastian's arrival was visceral. Dorothea watched him across the drawing room as Sebastian greeted her warmly, taking her hand and holding it just a moment longer than necessary. Benedict's expression went cold and dangerous, his aristocratic mask slipping to reveal something raw and furious beneath. That evening at dinner, Dorothea found herself seated between Sebastian and a young earl, while Benedict sat directly across from her, watching every interaction with barely concealed intensity. Sebastian was charming and attentive, speaking about his work with such passion that Dorothea found herself genuinely engaged, but she was aware of every moment that Benedict's gaze burned into her, of every tightening of his jaw when Sebastian made her laugh, of every darkening of his eyes when the physician's hand brushed hers. After dinner, the guests gathered for an informal musicale. Dorothea had been taking piano lessons with Lady Beatrice and had discovered a natural talent. When pressed, she agreed to play, a Chopin nocturne that matched her melancholy mood, full of longing and unspoken emotion. The room fell silent as she played, her fingers finding the notes with surprising confidence, her whole being pouring into the music, everything she could not say aloud. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of profound silence before enthusiastic applause broke out. She looked up to find Benedict staring at her with such naked longing that her breath caught. For one unguarded moment, everything he felt was written across his face: desire, frustration, possessiveness, and something deeper that made her heart race with dangerous hope. "Beautiful, Miss Clare," Sebastian said warmly, breaking the spell. "You are a woman of many talents." "Indeed," the Duchess agreed. "You must play for us again tomorrow evening at the ball. It will be the highlight of the party." The ball. Dorothea had not realized there was to be a formal ball, but of course there would be. It was the traditional culmination of any grand house party. The prospect filled her with both anticipation and dread. That night, unable to sleep, Dorothea walked in the palace gardens, the summer air warm and fragrant with roses. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to find Benedict emerging from the shadows, still in his evening clothes, looking disheveled and tormented. "You should not be out here alone," he said, his voice rough. "Neither should you," she countered. "What would people say, Your Grace?" "Damn what people say." The words exploded from him with such vehemence that Dorothea took a step back. "Forgive me, I should not—" He ran a hand through his hair, destroying its careful styling. "I cannot do this anymore, Dorothea. I cannot stand by and watch him court you, watch him touch you, watch him make you smile when I—" He cut himself off abruptly, but the words hung between them, heavy with implication. "When you what?" Dorothea whispered, her heart pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. Benedict closed the distance between them in 2 strides, standing so close she could feel the heat radiating from him. "When I want to do all of those things myself. When every time he looks at you, I want to tear him apart. When the thought of you marrying him, of him having the right to—" He stopped again, his breathing ragged. "This is madness. You are my ward, my cousin. I have no right to feel this way, no right to—" "Benedict." Dorothea placed her hand on his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath her palm. "What if I feel the same way?" His eyes closed as if in pain. "You cannot. You deserve someone like Thorn, respectable, uncomplicated, able to give you a life free of scandal and whispers, not a guardian who cannot separate duty from—" He opened his eyes, and the raw emotion there stole her breath. "From love." The word fell between them like a stone into still water, creating ripples that would change everything. "I love you," Benedict said, the words emerging as if torn from him. "I have tried not to. I've told myself it is merely protectiveness, responsibility, guilt over the years you lost. But it is none of those things, or perhaps all of them twisted into something I cannot control. I look at you, and I see everything I want and can never have. I want to kill any man who looks at you. I want to wake up beside you every morning for the rest of my life. I want to make you my Duchess, not because of duty or obligation, but because I cannot imagine my life without you in it." Dorothea felt tears stream down her face, her whole body trembling with the force of emotion. "Then why have you been pushing me toward Sebastian? Why have you been so distant, so determined to see me married to someone else?" "Because I thought it was the right thing," Benedict said brokenly. "Because I thought I was protecting you from scandal, from whispers, from a life forever marked by the irregularity of our relationship. Because I thought loving you was selfish, wrong, something I should deny for your sake. And now I realize that the only thing more selfish than claiming you would be watching you marry another man when you might—" He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the intensity in his eyes. "When you might feel even a fraction of what I feel for you." "More than a fraction," Dorothea whispered. "Everything, Benedict. I feel everything." He kissed her then, and it was nothing like the chaste, proper kiss one might expect from a Victorian courtship. It was desperate, consuming, months of denial and longing poured into one explosive moment. Dorothea responded with equal fervor, her hands tangling in his hair, her body pressed against his, as years of being told to be small and invisible fell away, replaced by fierce, claiming desire. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Benedict rested his forehead against hers. "I will not let you go, Dorothea. I cannot. Damn the scandal, damn the whispers, damn anyone who questions it. You were meant to be my Duchess. I see that now. I should have seen it the moment I walked into that convent and found you." "Yes," Dorothea breathed. "Yes to everything. Yes." They stood in the garden, wrapped in each other, the moon illuminating what would be the greatest scandal and greatest love story of the season. Neither noticed the figure watching from her upper window, Marguerite's face twisted with rage, as she witnessed the scene that would destroy her final hopes and give her the perfect weapon for revenge. Tomorrow's ball would change everything, but tonight, in the fragrant darkness of Blenheim's gardens, Benedict and Dorothea allowed themselves to simply be two people who had found each other against all odds, claiming a love that society would condemn but could never destroy. The Duke had made his decision. He would make the bastard niece, though she was no bastard at all, his Duchess, and he would dare the world to try to stop him. The morning after their confession in the gardens, Dorothea woke to find a note slipped under her door. Benedict's handwriting was bold and decisive. "We must speak privately before breakfast. The East Library, immediately. B." She dressed hastily, her heart racing with a mixture of exhilaration and apprehension. Last night had been revelatory, transformative, but in the cold light of morning, reality reasserted itself. They were guardian and ward, duke and dependent, and their love, however genuine, would ignite a scandal that could damage them both. Benedict was pacing the library when she arrived, still in his riding clothes, suggesting he had been awake for hours. He turned at her entrance, and despite the seriousness of the situation, his face lit with such joy at seeing her that Dorothea felt her fears momentarily dissolve. "Dorothea," he crossed to her, taking her hands in his. "I have been thinking all night about how to proceed. I will not lose you, but neither will I subject you to unnecessary cruelty from society. What are you proposing? First, I must speak with Dr. Thorne. He deserves honesty and respect. I will tell him that I have developed feelings beyond what is appropriate for a guardian, and that I intend to court you properly, if you will accept me." Dorothea's throat tightened with emotion. "Of course I will accept you. But Benedict, the scandal will be considerable," he acknowledged. "Our guardianship relationship makes this highly irregular. But we have certain advantages. You are my cousin by blood, which makes marriage legal if unconventional. The documents proving your legitimacy are ironclad. And most importantly, we are both of age and free to make our own choices." "Marguerite will use this against us," Dorothea warned. "She saw us last night in the garden. I saw her watching from a window." Benedict's expression hardened. "Let her try. I have been too cautious, too concerned with propriety and convention. My uncle stole 17 years of your life because he was more concerned with appearances than justice. I will not repeat his mistakes. What do you intend? Tonight at the ball, I intend to dance with you. I intend to make clear to everyone present that I am courting you with honorable intentions, and I intend to announce our engagement if you will consent to marry me." "Tonight?" Dorothea gasped. "That is so sudden. Should we not wait? Let people grow accustomed to the idea." "I will not give Marguerite or anyone else time to poison opinion against us," Benedict said firmly. "We will control the narrative. The Duchess has already given her blessing. I spoke with her at dawn. She finds the situation romantic and is prepared to champion us publicly." "You have been busy this morning," Dorothea said, torn between laughter and tears. "I have wasted enough time," Benedict replied. He drew her closer, his voice dropping to intimate intensity. "I lost 17 years with you already, Dorothea. I will not lose another day. Marry me. Be my Duchess. Let me spend the rest of my life proving you made the right choice. Yes, she whispered, standing on her toes to kiss him. Yes, 1,000 times, yes. Their kiss was interrupted by a deliberate cough. They sprang apart to find Lady Beatrice standing in the doorway, her expression amused rather than shocked. "I had wondered how long it would take you both to stop being noble idiots," she said dryly. "Benedict, Dr. Thorne is in the morning room and has requested to speak with Dorothea. I suggest you join that conversation, as honesty is always preferable to awkwardness." The conversation with Sebastian was one of the most difficult things Dorothea had ever done. He was gracious, understanding, and only the tightness around his eyes revealed his disappointment. "I suspected," he admitted after Benedict had explained the situation with quiet dignity. "The way you looked at each other. No one looks at a mere guardian that way, or at a ward for that matter." He turned to Dorothea. "I hope you will be very happy, Miss Clare, truly. You deserve every happiness." "You are a good man, Sebastian," Dorothea said, her eyes bright with tears. "Some woman will be very fortunate, but not you," he said with a sad smile. "Not when your heart belongs to someone else entirely." After Sebastian's departure, the day passed in a blur of preparation and tension. News of Benedict's intentions spread through the house party with remarkable speed. Whether through servants' gossip or Marguerite's deliberate whispers, Dorothea could not say. By afternoon, every guest knew that the Duke of Ashford intended to make a significant announcement at the ball. The speculation was intense. Some believed Benedict would announce Dorothea's engagement to another gentleman. Others whispered that he planned to publicly distance himself from his ward after discovering some disqualifying scandal. Only a few suspected the truth, that the Duke himself intended to claim the Woman's Society had labelled a charity case and adventurous. Dorothea dressed for the ball with Lady Beatrice's help, choosing a gown of deep sapphire silk that brought out the grey of her eyes and made her skin glow. Her chestnut hair was arranged in an elaborate style woven with pearls, a gift from Benedict that morning, accompanied by a note, "For my future Duchess. These belong to my mother. She would have loved you. B. You look like a queen," Beatrice said, her voice thick with emotion. "I am so proud of you, my dear. From that devastated girl who arrived at Hartwell House to this, you have become everything you were always meant to be." "I am terrified," Dorothea admitted. "What if they reject us? What if the scandal damages Benedict's position?" "Then you will face it together," Beatrice said simply. "That is what love means, Dorothea. Not the absence of difficulty, but the courage to face difficulty together." The ballroom at Blenheim Palace was a vision of grandeur. Thousands of candles in crystal chandeliers, banks of flowers perfuming the air, and hundreds of guests in their finest evening wear. Dorothea descended the staircase on Lady Beatrice's arm, aware of every eye turning toward her, every whispered speculation. Benedict waited at the bottom of the stairs, resplendent in formal evening dress, and when his eyes met hers, everything else faded to insignificance. He offered his arm, a gesture that was in itself a statement. Dukes did not typically escort their wards so publicly, so possessively. "You are breathtaking," he murmured as they entered the ballroom. "And you are about to become the most talked-about woman in England." "I thought I already held that distinction," Dorothea replied, with more courage than she felt. The Duchess of Marlborough approached, magnificent in emerald silk, her expression warmly approving. "Miss Clare, you look exquisite. Ashford, I believe the opening quadrille is beginning. You did promise me you would lead the dancing." It was the signal. Benedict led Dorothea to the floor for the opening dance, a position traditionally reserved for the highest-ranking couple or those with a special announcement. The other guests formed sets around them, their curiosity palpable. As the music began, Dorothea saw Marguerite across the room, her expression venomous. She stood with a group of matrons known for their rigid views on propriety, clearly preparing to condemn whatever announcement Benedict intended. "Ignore her," Benedict said, reading Dorothea's expression. "In a few minutes, her opinion will be utterly irrelevant." They moved through the quadrille with practiced grace, but Dorothea was aware of nothing but Benedict's hands guiding hers, his eyes holding hers with fierce tenderness, his presence solid and reassuring beside her. When the dance ended, Benedict did not release her hand. Instead, he signaled to the orchestra, which fell silent. The ballroom went quiet, hundreds of eyes fixed on the Duke and the woman at his side. "Your Grace, ladies and gentlemen," Benedict began, his voice carrying effortlessly across the vast space. "I have asked for your attention this evening to share news of great personal significance. Many of you know that 9 months ago I discovered I had a ward, my cousin, Miss Dorothea Clare, who had been hidden away for 17 years due to my late uncle's machinations. Since that discovery, I have worked to restore Miss Clare to her rightful position in society, to give her the life and opportunities that were stolen from her." He paused, his grip on Dorothea's hand tightening. "What I did not anticipate was that in the process of fulfilling my duty as guardian, I would discover something far more profound. Miss Clare is not merely my ward or my cousin. She has become the most important person in my life. Her intelligence, courage, kindness and grace have captured my heart completely." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Marguerite's expression went rigid with fury. "I am aware," Benedict continued calmly, "that our relationship as guardian and ward makes this announcement irregular. I'm aware that society may view my intentions with suspicion or disapproval. But I am also aware that true love, the kind that challenges, inspires and transforms, is rare and precious, and I refuse to sacrifice it on the altar of convention." He turned to face Dorothea fully, his expression tender and fierce in equal measure. "Miss Dorothea Clare, in front of these witnesses I ask you to do me the immeasurable honor of becoming my wife, my Duchess, and my partner in all things. Will you marry me?" The ballroom was absolutely silent, every guest frozen in anticipation. Dorothea felt tears stream down her face, but she was smiling as she replied clearly enough for everyone to hear. "Yes, Your Grace, I will marry you, with all my heart, yes." The kiss Benedict gave her was not entirely proper for such a public setting, but the assembled guests erupted in applause nonetheless, or at least most of them did. The progressive set, those who found the love story romantic and the defiance of convention refreshing, clapped enthusiastically. The more conservative members looked scandalized but uncertain, awaiting the lead of their social superiors. That lead came from the Duchess of Marlborough, who stepped forward beaming. "What a beautiful announcement! Nothing pleases me more than seeing two people brave enough to choose love over convention. You have my blessing and my full support." With the Duchess's endorsement, the tide turned decisively. Other influential guests added their congratulations, and within minutes, Benedict and Dorothea were surrounded by well-wishers. Not everyone approved. Marguerite and her faction stood rigid with disapproval in the corner, but enough of society's leaders had accepted the match that opposition became merely background noise. Later, as they waltzed together for the third time, oblivious to propriety that suggested they should dance with others, Benedict whispered, "No regrets?" "None," Dorothea replied honestly, "though I suspect our lives will be complicated." "Undoubtedly," Benedict agreed, "but we will face the complications together." The following morning, Lady Beatrice found Dorothea packing for the return journey to London. "You handled last night beautifully," she said. "You were poised, gracious, and showed no fear. Your mother would have been proud." "Did you know my mother?" Dorothea asked, surprised. "I met her once, years ago before your father's family discovered the marriage. She was lovely, kind and intelligent, much like you. Your father adored her, but he was weak. He allowed his family to bully him into hiding the marriage, into denying you. It killed your mother, that rejection. She died believing she and you were shameful secrets." Dorothea felt tears prick her eyes. "I wish I had known her." "She lives on in you," Beatrice said gently, "and now you will have the life she was denied, love without shame, acknowledgement without apology, and a future of your own choosing. That is the greatest tribute you could give her memory. The journey back to London was different from Dorothea's first arrival almost a year ago. Then she had been frightened, uncertain, and deeply ashamed of who she was. Now she travelled as the Duke of Ashford's acknowledged fiancée, a woman who had faced society's worst and emerged victorious, armed with the knowledge that she was loved, valued, and chosen. Marguerite's final attempt at revenge came in the form of anonymous letters to several scandal sheets suggesting impropriety between Benedict and Dorothea during her time as his ward. But Benedict had anticipated this and already met with editors personally, providing documentation of their courtship timeline and making clear that any publication would face legal consequences and his permanent enmity. The letters were never published. Marguerite was quietly but firmly exiled from society, her vindictiveness having finally exceeded what even her family connections could excuse. 3 months later, on a crisp October morning, Dorothea stood in the private chapel at Ashford House, wearing a gown of ivory silk and the Ashford diamonds, preparing to become a duchess. Lady Beatrice adjusted her veil with gentle hands. "Ready?" she asked. Dorothea thought of the girl in the convent, believing herself worthless and unwanted. She thought of the humiliation at Lady Pemberton's ball when she had believed her dreams impossible. She thought of all the challenges and obstacles that had brought her to this moment, each one a test that had revealed her strength rather than her weakness. "Ready," she replied with absolute certainty. The ceremony was intimate, attended only by close friends and family. Dr. Sebastian Thorne was even present, having maintained his friendship with both Benedict and Dorothea, his presence a testament to his grace and their mutual respect. As Dorothea walked down the aisle toward Benedict, she saw the raw emotion on his face, love, pride, and something like awe that she, the forgotten ward, had chosen him as completely as he had chosen her. When Benedict slipped the wedding ring onto her finger, his voice was steady but thick with emotion. "With this ring I thee wed, with my body I thee worship, and with all my worldly goods I thee endow. You are no longer my ward, Dorothea. You are my wife, my duchess, my equal in all things. And I will spend my life ensuring you never doubt your worth again." The wedding breakfast was a joyful affair, filled with laughter and genuine warmth. The Duchess of Marlborough proposed a toast that summarized the sentiment of all present. "To the Duke and Duchess of Ashford, may their love story remind us all that true worth has nothing to do with circumstances of birth and everything to do with strength of character. And may their courage in choosing each other inspire us all to value love over convention." As evening fell and the last guests departed, Benedict found Dorothea standing in the conservatory where they had first truly spoken months ago, when he had told her he was pushing her towards Sebastian because he thought it was right. "What are you thinking?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I am thinking about how far I have travelled," Dorothea replied, leaning back against his solid warmth. "From believing I was worthless to standing here as your duchess. It seems impossible." "You were never worthless," Benedict said fiercely. "You were always extraordinary. You simply needed the freedom to discover it for yourself." He turned her in his arms, his expression tender. "Thank you for choosing me, Dorothea. Thank you for being brave enough to love me, despite every reason society gave you not to." "I could not help loving you," she replied simply. "You saw me, truly saw me, when everyone else saw only what they expected to see. You gave me back my life. How could I not love you?" "I did not give you anything," Benedict corrected gently. "I simply removed the obstacles that were keeping you imprisoned. Everything you have become, every triumph, every moment of courage, that was always you, Dorothea. I merely had the privilege of witnessing it." They stood together as moonlight streamed through the conservatory glass, two people who had found each other against impossible odds, who had chosen love over convention, courage over comfort. Tomorrow, They would face whatever challenges came with being a duke and duchess who had defied society's rules. But tonight, they were simply Benedict and Dorothea, two souls who had recognized each other across the divide of propriety and convention and refused to let anything keep them apart. The forgotten ward had become a duchess, but more importantly, she had become herself, fully, completely, without shame or apology, and that transformation, more than any title or social position, was her true victory. Spring arrived in London with unusual warmth, and the city seemed to bloom overnight, a fitting metaphor for the transformation that had occurred in the months since Benedict and Dorothea's wedding. The scandal that many predicted would destroy them had instead become one of society's most discussed and ultimately celebrated love stories. The Duke who had defied convention for love, and the ward who had proven herself worthy of a coronet through intelligence and grace, had captured the public imagination in ways neither had anticipated. Dorothea stood in the morning room of Ashford House, reviewing correspondence that had become increasingly voluminous. As Duchess, she received dozens of invitations daily, but more interesting were the letters from women across England, from aristocratic ladies to working-class girls who had been inspired by her story. They wrote seeking advice, sharing their own struggles against societal limitations, and expressing gratitude that someone of her position was openly advocating for women's education and advancement. "Another dozen requests for your patronage," Lady Beatrice observed, entering with her own stack of correspondence. She had taken up semi-permanent residence at Ashford House, serving as Dorothea's advisor and companion in her expanding charitable work. The girls' school in Manchester, the Teachers' College in Edinburgh, and, oh, this is interesting, the Queen's Secretary has written to inquire whether you would accept an appointment to the Royal Commission on Education. Dorothea looked up, startled. "The Queen wishes me to serve on a royal commission. It appears your work with my school and the 3 additional institutions you and Benedict have established in the past 6 months has attracted attention at the highest levels." Beatrice replied with evident pride. "You are becoming rather influential, Your Grace." The title still felt strange, even after 6 months of marriage. Dorothea had grown into her role as Duchess, but she had been determined not to let the position define her. Instead, she had used the platform it provided to advance causes she cared about, particularly education for girls and women of all classes. Benedict had been her greatest supporter, providing funding and using his political influence to open doors that would have remained closed to a woman acting alone. "The Commission meets in Parliament," Dorothea said thoughtfully. "I wonder how the gentlemen will react to having a woman among their number." "With the same skepticism they initially showed toward your school initiatives," Beatrice replied, "until you demonstrate competence and intelligence that make opposition look foolish, at which point they will pretend they supported you all along." Dorothea laughed, recognizing the truth in her aunt's cynical observation. Her work had indeed faced resistance initially, but results spoke louder than prejudice. The schools she had established were already showing remarkable outcomes, with girls from humble backgrounds receiving education that equipped them for more than just domestic service. Benedict entered the morning room, still in his riding clothes, his hair windswept and his expression animated. Even after 6 months of marriage, Dorothea felt her heart skip at the sight of him, the way his eyes lit when he saw her, the unconscious smile that curved his lips, the immediate way he crossed to kiss her as if they had been separated for weeks rather than hours. "Good morning, my love," he said warmly. "Beatrice, you look particularly pleased with yourself. What have you been plotting?" "The Queen has requested Dorothea serve on the Royal Commission on Education," Beatrice announced. "Our little ward is becoming quite the reformer." Benedict's expression flooded with pride. "Of course she is. Though I suspect Her Majesty's advisers realize that having the Duchess of Ashford lends the Commission credibility with precisely the progressive elements they need to win over." He turned to Dorothea. "Will you accept?" "I think I must," Dorothea replied. If I have this platform, this opportunity to effect real change, I cannot refuse it simply because it will be difficult or uncomfortable. Spoken like the woman I married, Benedict said approvingly. Now, I have news of my own. I have been invited to speak at the House of Lords next week regarding factory reform legislation. I intend to propose amendments that would mandate basic education for child workers and limit their hours. I was hoping you might review my speech. Your insights on education policy would strengthen the arguments considerably. This was the partnership they had built, not merely a conventional aristocratic marriage where the wife managed the household while the husband pursued politics and business, but a true collaboration where they supported each other's work and combined their efforts to create meaningful change. It was unconventional, certainly, and some of society's more traditional members disapproved, but Dorothea had learned that disapproval from those invested in maintaining injustice was often the surest sign one was doing something worthwhile. I would be honored, Dorothea said, though you realize we are becoming exactly the sort of reforming couple that makes conservative hostesses nervous. Good, Benedict replied firmly. Let them be nervous. England is changing, and those who refuse to change with it will be left behind. That afternoon, Dorothea had a visitor she had not expected, Marguerite Ashford. The former beauty looked diminished, her face drawn and her expensive clothes unable to disguise a fundamental defeat. She had been living in virtual exile since the Blenheim ball, her vindictive behavior having cost her the social position she had valued above all else. I know I have no right to call, Marguerite began without preamble, once they were alone in the drawing room. I know I treated you abominably, that I tried to destroy you out of jealousy and spite. I do not expect forgiveness. Dorothea studied the woman who had once been her tormentor, feeling not triumph but something closer to pity. Then why have you come? Because I wanted you to know that I understand now what I could not see then, that Benedict never looked at me the way he looks at you, that the position I coveted was never truly mine to lose, that my entire life's ambition was built on delusion and vanity. Marguerite's voice cracked slightly. You won, Dorothea, not through manipulation or scheming, but by simply being yourself, intelligent, kind, genuine, everything I was not. I did not set out to win anything, Dorothea said gently. I simply tried to survive, and then to become someone I could respect. If that resulted in happiness, it was fortune, not strategy. I know. Marguerite stood, preparing to leave. I am going to the continent. My family has arranged a position as companion to an elderly relative in Italy. It is charitable employment, really. A genteel form of exile, but perhaps away from London, away from constant reminders of what I lost, I might learn to become someone less poisonous. I hope you find peace, Dorothea said, and meant it. I hope you discover that your worth exists independent of social position or male approval. It is a lesson I learned late, but it changed everything. After Marguerite departed, Dorothea sat for a long moment reflecting on how different their paths had been. Marguerite had possessed every advantage, beauty, breeding, social position, and had lost everything through cruelty and manipulation. Dorothea had possessed nothing, and had gained everything through resilience, integrity, and the courage to be vulnerable enough for love. That evening, Benedict hosted a dinner for his political allies, progressive members of Parliament who shared his vision for reform. Dorothea presided as hostess, with confidence that would have seemed impossible a year ago, guiding conversations, introducing connections between guests, and contributing her own insights to debates about education and social policy. She saw admiration in the men's faces as they listened to her, not the condescending tolerance often shown to women who ventured opinions, but genuine respect for her expertise and intelligence. After the guests departed, Benedict found her in their private sitting room, staring into the fire with a contemplative expression. You were magnificent tonight, he said, settling beside her and pulling her close. Lord Hartfield told me he has never met a woman with such a comprehensive understanding of education economics. He wants to introduce you to the Chancellor. A year ago, I believed my life was over, Dorothea said softly. I believed the humiliation at Lady Pemberton's ball had destroyed any possibility of happiness or purpose. And now, look at what my life has become. Meaningful work, genuine influence, and most precious of all, love that does not diminish me, but enlarges me. You enlarged yourself, Benedict corrected. I simply had the wisdom to recognize your value and the courage to claim you, despite every social convention telling me I should not. Do you ever regret it? Dorothea asked. The scandal, the whispers, the way some of society still disapproves of our match? Benedict turned her to face him fully, his expression fierce and tender. Not for one moment. You are the best decision I ever made, Dorothea. You challenged me to be better than the conventional Duke society expected. You showed me that true nobility has nothing to do with ancient titles and everything to do with character, courage, and integrity. How could I possibly regret that? They sat together in comfortable silence, the fire crackling and the London night settling around them. Dorothea thought about her parents. The father who had been too weak to defend his marriage, the mother who had died believing herself ashamed. She wished they could see her now, could know that their daughter had not only survived but thrived, that she had taken the shame meant to define her and transformed it into strength. 6 months later, the Royal Commission on Education released its report, with Dorothea's contributions prominently featured. The recommendations: mandatory elementary education for all children regardless of class or gender, improved teacher training, and increased funding for girls' schools, were radical for their time. Not all would be immediately implemented, but the report shifted the national conversation and laid groundwork for reforms that would transform English education in the coming decades. The newspapers discussed the Duchess of Ashford's remarkable influence, with varying degrees of approval and disapproval, but Dorothea had learned not to measure her worth by others' opinions. She measured it by the letters she received from girls, who now had access to education they would have been denied, by the teachers who finally had resources and training, by the small but meaningful ways she was helping to create a society where a person's future was determined by capability and effort rather than accidents of birth. On a warm summer evening, Benedict and Dorothea hosted a garden party at their country estate in Hertfordshire. Among the guests were Lady Beatrice, Dr. Sebastian Thorne, now engaged to a brilliant young woman he had met through Dorothea's charitable work, the Duchess of Marlborough, and dozens of others who had supported them through scandal and transformation. As sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and rose, Benedict led Dorothea away from the party to a quiet corner of the garden where roses bloomed in wild profusion. "Do you remember when I found you in that convent?" he asked. "When I told you I had come to claim what was stolen from both of us. I remember thinking you were the most overwhelming person I had ever encountered," Dorothea replied with a smile. "Intimidating and magnetic in equal measure." "I meant what I said that day," Benedict continued. "Your life was stolen from you, but so was mine in a way. I was living exactly as expected, fulfilling duties, maintaining position, never questioning whether there might be more. You changed everything, Dorothea. You showed me what it means to truly live rather than merely exist." "We saved each other," Dorothea said softly. "You gave me freedom, but I gave you purpose beyond duty. We are better together than we ever could have been apart." As they stood in the garden surrounded by roses and the golden light of summer's end, Dorothea reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her from a silent convent to this moment of perfect contentment. She had been told her entire life that she was worthless, shameful, a mistake to be hidden away. She had believed those lies for 17 years. But she had learned the truth, that her worth had never depended on others' acknowledgement, that shame was a tool used to control rather than a reflection of reality, that the courage to define oneself rather than accept others' definitions was perhaps the greatest freedom of all. The bastard niece, though she had never truly been illegitimate, had become a duchess, but more importantly, she had become fully and completely herself. She had taken the worst life could offer and transformed it into triumph, not through bitterness or revenge, but through resilience, grace, and the courage to love and be loved without reservation. As night fell and stars emerged above the English countryside, Benedict and Dorothea returned to their guests, hand in hand, two people who had defied every convention and expectation to build a life of purpose, passion, and profound partnership. Their love story would be remembered and retold, the Duke who vowed to make his forgotten ward his Duchess, and the woman brave enough to believe she deserved such love. They had bloomed exactly where they were planted, transforming barren ground into gardens of extraordinary beauty. And in doing so, they had shown that the most powerful act of rebellion is simply becoming oneself, fully and without apology, regardless of what society demands or expects. The forgotten ward was forgotten no more. She was remembered, celebrated, and above all, loved, not despite who she was, but because of it, and that made all the difference. If you enjoyed this story of love, courage, and transformation, please click the like button and subscribe to the channel for more compelling historical dramas. Share in the comments which moment touched you most. Was it Dorothea's first humiliation, Benedict's garden confession, or their ultimate triumph? I love hearing your thoughts, and your engagement helps these stories reach others who need to hear them. Thank you for listening, and remember, your worth is never determined by others' opinions, but by the courage with which you claim your own life.